Hey, writers, I've got a real treat for you today. I am joined with Mona Zarka. Welcome, Mona.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I would love to introduce our writers to you. So, Mona is an Author Accelerator certified book coach who coaches fantasy, science fiction, adventure, and slice of life. She loves stories that feature resilient characters and healthy relationships are a plus. When she's not reading, she appreciates linguistics, visual design, and bookstores. And in an alternative universe, she's actually a book hoarding, chocolate loving, tea drinking dragon. That's fantastic. But I feel like we get a huge sense of your personality and reading preferences from that last sentence.
Yes, dragons and chocolate and tea. Yes.
Well, I am just so happy to be talking with Mona today because Mona and I share something in common in that we both really appreciate uplifting stories. And I suppose uplifting could be a somewhat broad term and maybe mean different things to different people. But maybe do you want to tell us how you see an uplifting story?
So yeah, I thought about this a lot in preparation for this conversation. But I think the top thing for me for an uplifting story is going to be the tone and the ending and seeing characters either grow or overcome something in the story. That's how I would define it, I think.
Yeah. And I think you can have something still be uplifting as long as, I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be a perfect, bow on the top,
Oh
happy
no.
ending for everybody, but we can still come away with a sense of hope and
Yes.
maybe encouragement even.
Yes, definitely the hope, like hope for the character, hope for the society at large. Those are, that's the kind of like, it doesn't have to be like, oh, here's, yeah, like you said, like a neat, like let's tie everything up with a neat bow.
Yeah.
Because then that can backfire on you because if you, yeah, like if you try to tie everything up too neatly, then people, I'm often left with a sense of like, oh, that was too convenient,
Yes.
which I feel like is not what we want from an uplifting story.
Yeah. If it's too simplistic, if it's too idealistic, uh it kind of feels like you've been betrayed.
Yes. It's like, why did that happen? Like that doesn't that negates all of the hardship that they just overcame in this story. And then you're like, oh, it's not really, it's a letdown.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
also think it can make people feel like it's less attainable because you can identify that that type of ending is so unrealistic that um that it reminds you that this is just fiction, this is just a story, this can't ever happen, this wouldn't happen for me, I can never have a happy
Yes.
ending like that. But if it ends in a more realistic way that's perhaps not so tidy, then it makes you feel more like maybe it's in the realm of possibility for you.
I think that's a big thing that we want from uplifting stories, actually, is to be able to see ourselves in that position and to see that we can have hope for ourselves in our situation. We see ourselves reflected in the character, we see our situation reflected in their situation, and then we see how they overcome it or make it better or grow from it. And we're like, oh, I can do that too.
Yeah.
I think that's a cornerstone.
Agreed. So I would argue that uplifting, hopeful stories are good for any age reader. But
Is there any
why?
age reader it's
I
not good
know,
for?
right. But why specifically for kids and teens do you think that these kinds of stories are valuable?
These are foundational for our view of life, and that is the period where we're growing and we're coming to terms with what life is, what our world is, who's around us. So I think that these are exactly the kind of story we want our kids to have so that they can then um, look to accomplishing that same kind of growth and what's the word I'm looking for? Like achieve the same kind of uh betterment is not the word that I'm
Yeah,
looking for,
yeah.
Sarah.
That's okay. That's all right. I know what you're talking about though, because yeah, you certainly don't want to have a whole bunch of children going around feeling hopeless about life
Yeah.
based on some kind of depressing story that they've
Yeah.
just read. Yeah.
You definitely don't want that because then they feel like there's nothing they can do in the world and you will very easily go off the cliff of like depression and hopelessness and like, and so I think when we raise our kids with uplifting stories, they have that optimism in life that enables them to accomplish things later.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Okay, so one thing that I feel like we should probably distinguish for our writers here, because just because we're talking about uplifting and wanting to impart a sense of hope for people, we're not necessarily talking about teaching morals through our stories. So maybe could you help us distinguish between something, I don't know, towing that line between not wanting to get too moralistic in what you're writing?
I think the issue with, I think where we get too close to moralistic stories is when we have a very specific message that we're trying to tell, and we're not approaching it from like a 360 kind of perspective in the story itself. So, like, if you go into a story and you're like, I really want to say cars are bad, random, very random, but like, okay, you really want to say that, and your whole story is like all about cars being bad, and you're not acknowledging the ways in which that statement may not be true in some circumstances or some situations or whatever, um, people will see that. They will
Yeah.
see it very clearly, and kids more than most. They will see that you are pushing a message, and there's nothing that turns them away faster. Like I gave my son some books, I don't know, a few weeks ago, a month ago, and he was like, "These are so simple," and like he was totally turned off by them, and it was this kind of idea that they're flat when you don't have the openness to discuss different perspectives or to maybe just acknowledge different perspectives in it. I think that's where we go wrong with the morals.
Yeah.
It's not that we can't have morals, but we all have our different experiences and perspectives, and we bring that to each book that we're reading. So approaching it very one-sidedly is basically negating the perspective of your reader.
Yeah.
Does that, yeah.
Yeah. And it can be a very positive aspect of a book, even if we can see the character grappling with
Yes.
these different perspectives as they are perhaps encountering them for the first time.
Yeah, for sure. And then you have that open-endedness from that struggle um with the concept and the idea.
Yeah. Yeah. So I know that this can be a very difficult thing for kidlit writers in particular because we are approaching the story as adults writing for young people. And sometimes it can be difficult for us to remember perhaps what it was like to be 8, 10, 15,
Totally.
you know, and at the same time, I know very well-meaning adults want to pass on what they have learned so that younger generations don't have to make the same mistakes,
Oh,
perhaps,
yeah.
that they have made. So it's a very natural thing for us to want to write the cars are bad kind of story, if that's the, perspective that we've taken on later in life. Um, but this is a road that generally we don't want to travel down. So I don't know if you have any tips for the writers, who might want to check, keep their stories in check to make sure that their primary purpose isn't for the fact that they're trying to teach kids a lesson, let's say.
So I would say that considering other perspectives is key here. And in order to do that, getting other people's opinion on what you've written so that you can tell how things are coming across to them is really key. Because sometimes we, like you said, we go into it with this idea that we want to convey, and we don't see that we're, sticking so hard to a single line. Um, so definitely getting feedback from other people is key. Also, you can just like, if you know that you have an idea that you're trying to convey, oh, it's not say moral, but like just an idea, um, you can try approaching it yourself through a brainstorming session or writing about it and see what other, um, kind of like the idea of a literary foil. Like just put that idea on one side of the paper and think, okay, what are the opposites? What are parallels? What are not quite opposites, but I'm thinking of the color wheel and how you have like,
Sure. Yeah.
yeah, like,
Yeah.
um, you'll have opposite colors, and then you can have also like a color scheme with three colors,
Yep.
where you split it in three. So something like if you keep that idea in mind and then approach it like there's ideas at an angle to it, you can try to see what you're missing from your story.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I feel like too, it probably, I mean, it's going to depend what age group we're writing for,
Oh,
certainly.
for sure.
Um, you know, the complexities can perhaps be explored in greater depth when we're writing for YA, than when we are writing picture books. It is going to be a bit more simple, but not simplistic, perhaps is the way to distinguish that. And we just want to avoid these saccharine endings and everybody went home happy and sometimes those just are so frustrating to encounter when you've reached the end.
Yeah, yeah. I'm thinking of a great picture book that for me accomplishes this happy, hopeful ending, but doesn't come off as saccharine, which is, I know you've read this, The Most Magnificent Thing.
Oh, I love that
Um,
book.
and it's great because you have this progression of the character growing through the story, and you have a lesson, technically, which is like try lots of different things. And there's another lesson in there, which if you haven't read it, like this is a great little picture book. Um, but it's not simplistic
Yeah.
because I think the main character goes through so many different things in the process of the book. Um, it doesn't come off that so simplistic.
Yeah, it comes off, her ending comes across as being earned because
Yes,
she
that's a great
worked
word for
towards
it.
it. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, since you've mentioned a picture book, would you care to mention maybe any middle grade or YA books that you've particularly enjoyed that you found to be more uplifting?
Yeah. My favorite, Howl's Moving Castle by Diane Wynne Jones. That is definitely like the top of my list when it comes to uplifting and not simple or saccharine or anything like that. It has a lot of depth to the story and to the characters, and you see it over the course of the narrative. I love it.
Yeah,
It's, yeah. Have you read it, Sarah?
I've not.
Oh my gosh. Why?
I don't know. I don't know. So now I will have to read it. Now I have homework and that's fine. That's good homework.
That one is middle grade, maybe bordering on YA. It has a little bit of like a romantic subplot. Well, some people may say more than a subplot, but I consider it a subplot.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I'll
that's
counter because in middle grade, I love The Remarkable Journey of Coyote Sunrise. And
yes.
I feel like that is a story that does a great job of being uplifting while also approaching something that's incredibly sad.
Oh, it's
You
kind of
know,
tragic.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
let's be
But
real.
I think it kind of highlights some of the best in humanity as well. So I love that story. And For a graphic novel, I love Roller Girl. Roller Girl is one of my favorites. So
I haven't even heard of that. I'm gonna
yeah,
write that one down.
it's why I fell in love with graphic novels. Actually, I love that book. And what about some YA? Do we have any YA that we especially love?
Um, let's see, does any of this count as YA? I have a list. I guess Dealing with Dragons is YA.
Hmm.
And The Blue Sword. These are older. Let me think. The Goblin Emperor, and Green Glass House. No, Green Glass House is more middle grade. But those are all books that I would say are uplifting.
Yeah.
Um, oh, you know which one is YA? 13th Child, also
Mm,
by Reedy. That one is fantastic. It's growth through the story. Um, it's just you will like we were just talking about perspectives and taking into different perspectives into account. Like this story is like perfect for that.
yeah.
It's all about that.
Yeah. I guess in the YA space, I really love I really love a lot of Nicola Yoon's work. I especially love The Sun is Also a Star, which, it does not end with a tidy ending, but it does end with a hopeful ending. And so I love that one.
Right. I love book recommendations.
Well, writers, I just want to make sure that you can figure out here how to connect with Mona. Mona also works as a book coach and an editor who specializes in revision. So, particularly of speculative fiction, like in the fantasy, adventure, sci-fi type space. So if you have a finished manuscript and you are looking for a developmental edit, Mona is your girl
Or
here.
another
And
perspective.
yes, yes. And Mona, you are one of the most well-read people I know. I know I
Thank
might have
you.
mentioned a couple books here today that you happen to not have read, but you are one
More
of the
than
most
normal.
well-read people I know, and that's certainly a benefit for all the writers who work with you. So do you want to talk a bit about where people can connect with you?
Yeah. So you can check out my website, which is skysongeditorial.com. Um, and it's a straightforward website. I have a contact form there. I also have a worksheet that is about getting into revisions. So if you want to check out my book coaching style, you could check that out. It's downloadable on my website.
Awesome. Awesome. And we will have links to all of this in the show notes and all of that. So, Mona, thank you so much for this
Thank
conversation.
you,
It's
Sarah.
always happy to talk about the
I love
more
talking with
uplifting,
you. Yes.
the more
We need
uplifting
more of
things.
those stories, guys. Come on,
I know.
bring
Let's
them.
write more of those stories, especially right now. The last few years have been hard for a lot of people. And I think children have probably borne the brunt of this more than any other demographic because when adults are stressed, children are stressed. And the kids have had to deal with a lot of really hard things in the last 5 years. So we need we need more uplifting books to for these young readers, I think. So, all right. Well, thank you so much, Mona. And thank you, writers. We will see you next time. Bye.